Welcome back. You're watching Business Morning on Channels Television, while we try to sort out the technical issues there and continue the conversation with Dr. Godbless Safuha, the Executive Secretary Association of Non-Bank Microfinance Institutions of Nigeria. I've got Business News Editor and co-anchor Business Morning here with me in the studio, Bosun Omofaye. Bosun, good morning to you, and thank you so much for coming in. So we're talking about microfinance banks, and
yes.
Conversations that we've had prior to today's program has been that microfinance banks seem to be lagging behind with regards to ensuring that the very critical sector of the economy that gets finance, we're talking about the real sector of the economy, are not getting as much as they are getting. There's been reports that there was loan loss of about 4 billion naira recorded last year. And so I was going to try to get Dr. Safuha to comment on the fact that, microfinance banks seem to be having it a little bit topsy-turvy at the moment.
Yeah, they've always had it topsy-turvy. Again, what you see in the microfinance bank is a reflection of the entire economy. It's a reflection of the financial system. It's a reflection of the entire banking sector. If you go down the memory lane just a little bit, we started with the community banks, and then with a separate agency set up to regulate the community banks, the National Board for Community Banks in Nigeria, which was something akin to the central bank, as it were. Then that was about 10, 15, 20 years ago. Then we scrapped that agency, bring everything into the central bank with the creation of a non-financial institutions department, and non-bank and other financial institutions, the OFID office. Then we went away with the microfinance, or sort of the community banks. Then we came up under the Soludo's administration at the central bank with the microfinance banks. And it was a very wonderful idea. And the idea was very simple, as you have in Indonesia, in Bangladesh, and in other parts of the world, especially in the Far East, including some African countries like South Africa and Kenya, where microfinance and cooperative thrift societies have actually thrived and become an engine of growth, supporting, for example, in Kenya, Safaricom and a few other institutions. They are the major shareholders in a number of companies, including banks in Kenya, for example. You have these microfinance banks or cooperative societies, what they call a credit union in the US, for example, who are also major investors and major customers in Equity Bank of Kenya, for example. So these are very strong institutions. In fact, about some years ago, we asked one of the financial regulators in Kenya, he says, and he jokes, he said, I would rather let a commercial bank to fail in Kenya than allow a cooperative society thrift finance.
Now that's saying a lot.
To say, because these guys are they are major shareholders in Econet Wireless of Kenya. So they are very strong. Now, we went to the drawing board, and about 10, 11 years ago, we came up with a microfinance bank. Again, we tried to use a bit of the old model and the new one. But that policy has been rejigged over time. Today, we have a few of them that are strong and reliable. And we must give that to them. It's been a very tough and difficult operating environment. Yeah. Again, you find the big banks hitherto set up their own microfinance banks. Then the central bank came in again and said, look, you're competing with this microfinance, which ought to be at the lower level, helping the artisans, mechanics, welders, hairdressers, what have you, tailors, and things like that. And those who are in that business is needing 5,000, 10,000, 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, perhaps 1.5 million private schools and those
apart from private schools, you have some people who want to start making water, pure water.
Yes,
like
real estate at the bottom of the pyramid, so to speak. And billions of naira has been lent. They have hundreds of thousands and millions of customers of Nigeria. But again, if you look at the spread, it haven't really spread across some states, as it were. The central bank back then actually encouraged some state governments to own microfinance banks.
Yes, they did.
And yesterday there was news on the social media that Sokoto state government in the northwest is thinking of setting up 3 microfinance banks. Now, Sokoto state, for example, has been doing really well in terms of agriculture. And the government, and at its own level, and because I interviewed the Commissioner for Agriculture and Commerce, whatever, in Sokoto State sometime last year. I think cabinet things have changed now. Perhaps the gentleman, the elderly man, let me put it, sorry, was no longer in office. And he spoke about how much the state governor is doing from the internally generated revenues and federation accounts to lend money. He is also, as a commissioner for agriculture in Sokoto State, has acres of land, and he's a full-time farmer. Now, that's encouraging. Now, they need to take it to the next level, and they're looking at setting up microfinance banks. Whether 3 will be too much or so, that's something left to decide. But they must have a plan in place, perhaps one for agriculture and those who have. Then a few months ago, also in Bayelsa State, you find them also setting up a new microfinance bank, what they call the Izon Microfinance Bank, which is also helping the artisans and the fishermen and market women, those who are doing cane weaving and basket weaving and other businesses, palm wine tapper in the South. So we need this microfinance. We need more of them. However, the interest rate, currency devaluation, currency depreciation, oil prices would, insurgency, violence between tribes in the Middle Belt, in the North Central, and what have you, will, whether you like it or not, begin to affect them. But the rate of success for a few of them had been very, very encouraging.
But then you see, we know that this present administration is very keen to, among other things, boost social inclusion. It has a social inclusion agenda.
Yes.
Have you been thinking, I know I have been, how these microfinance banks can actually key into this particular...
You know, if you look at the social inclusion, which goes back, takes us or kind of fan out to your medium and small enterprises policy over time, which hasn't really delivered much, and we've had 1,000 policies and frameworks. Which
means it should change.
The NESG, well, that's one of the talking points that they just concluded Economic Summit Group, that we haven't really delivered much to the MSME. Now you need to key that into the microfinance bank, and key it into the Bank of Industry, and perhaps key it into SMEDA, and key it into a few other agencies. Well, now, that was the microfinance banks were also part of the needs of the Obasanjo's administration.
Okay, so hold on to that
National Economic Empowerment Development Strategy and the SEEDC at the state level.
Needs and seeds.
Yeah, the needs and the seeds policies were to deliver part of that.
Mr. Bolson, I know that we've got a lot to talk about, Bolson, so let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll continue this conversation. Unfortunately, we've not been able to connect with Dr. Safuha. We're still having those issues.
Access.
One of those things. But Business Morning continues in just a moment. Bolson Omofaye will be here with me when I return in just a moment. Stay with us.